Hi, Dr. B, and welcome to the Truth About Weight Loss Summit. Thank you so much for being here.
Chef AJ, it is a great pleasure to be here with you today. Always great to connect with you, with your audience, and I'm excited to talk about my personal weight loss journey and what I think some of the things are that were underneath that can help people in their personal journey as well.
Well, I'm always so excited to talk to you. And as a gastroenterologist and a New York Times bestselling author of the wonderful book, Fiber Fueled, what does our gut have to do with our weight?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. So, many times we think about weight in terms of calories in, calories out. You may think of it in terms of your metabolism, but I want to go even beyond that. And I want to talk about the connection between our gut and our metabolism to help you unpack and understand why working through your gut can be the solution to recalibrating your metabolism and achieving your weight loss goals. So
fantastic. This is something really important for our viewers to learn.
Excellent. So before I begin, I just want to say hello to everyone, and I thank you for being here with me today, and hope that this is something that will be helpful and useful to you as you move forward in your life. I think it's important to frame how we think about these things to begin with. It frustrates me. It frustrates me as a doctor to see that you are being sold things that I don't believe in, things that I don't think actually work. Diet culture tells us that the way that we can accomplish our weight loss goals is by restricting, by removing, by reducing, contracting our diet less. And in some ways, this is actually very harmful, very dangerous. This is an approach that puts us in a position where we become separated from our food and we develop fear of our food. We no longer find joy, pleasure, love in our food. Yet we're human. We're supposed to love our food. We're supposed to find joy and pleasure there. And I think that the solution is actually the polar opposite. That's what I want to talk to you about today. I think the solution is actually radical abundance, but of the right food. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to pull up my slides here for everyone to see. The title of my talk is Fiber Fueled Weight Loss. And thank you again, everyone, for having me. This is me. I don't love looking at photos of myself from the past. I never have. Part of it is that I can look at this person right here. This is me in 2012. I'm 32 years old. I am a highly accomplished medical doctor, med school at Georgetown, residency at Northwestern, chief medical resident, won the highest award in my residency, and Northwestern even paid for me to get a degree, a master's degree in clinical investigation, which was very nice of them. But anyway, and here I am at the University of North Carolina, finishing my GI fellowship. And yet, I'm miserable. 50 pounds over my high school weight. Digestive issues. I could not tolerate legumes or whole grains. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, extreme fatigue. I mean, to the point of not just enjoying a cup of coffee, but being completely dependent on coffee and energy drinks just to sustain myself during the day. Tons of anxiety. And part of why I don't like looking back at these photos is there was such a severe level of low self-esteem, low confidence. And I was blessed. I had someone come into my life who opened my mind, opened my eyes, changed me. I met my wife. And after I met her, I started to dabble and experiment with plants, started bringing them more into my diet. I mean, I can assure you at this time, I was literally 2 fast food meals per day and less than 5% plant-based. And I started to expand the plants. I started to drink smoothies. And then this was over the course of time. I came across this study. It was 2014. Diet rapidly and reproducibly alters the human gut microbiome. This is by Lawrence David, who's at Duke. This was published in Nature, the top journal on the planet. And he basically took people and gave them 5 days of a completely plant-based diet versus 5 days of a completely animal-based diet, meaning meat, dairy, and eggs. And, this is not him trying to prove like what's better, carnivore or vegan. That's not the issue. The issue is that in 2014, we actually did not have a clear indication yet that you could change your microbiome with your diet. So the idea was, let's just give polar opposite diets and show that you can change your diet in between. So that's what they did. And here's what I saw when I read this paper, and I would encourage each of you to check it out. 5 days, literally 5 days on a plant-based diet, your gut microbiome is changing, and it is changing for the better. You are enhancing good microbes, and these microbes, they get basically charged up with fiber, and then they turn that fiber into what are called short-chain fatty acids, which are the most anti-inflammatory molecule that I've ever come across. And we're going to be talking more about those today. But then on the flip side, you look at this 5 days of the animal-based diet, again, you're changing your microbiome, but in this case, it's actually kind of disturbing. What we see is that you're getting more inflammatory microbes. These microbes are not helping to heal. They're actually contributing to inflammation. You're actually getting antibiotic resistance showing up in just 5 days of eating this way. And you get a burst, not of short-chain fatty acids. Actually, you get less short-chain fatty acids, but instead you get a burst of secondary bile salts, which are carcinogens associated with cancer. So when I saw this, man, I was motivated. I need more plants. What am I doing? Why would I eat meat? So let me move towards these plants. I started doing this more. And I also started to treat my patients with a plant-based diet, getting amazing results in my gastroenterology practice. Then I came across another study. This came out in 2018. I was actually in 2017 in the front row at Digestive Disease Week in Chicago. And there stands the lead author of this study, Rob Knight. He is the organizer of the American Gut Project, the largest study that exists. It's actually a global study, not just Americans. The largest study that exists that allows us to make connections between our gut microbiome and our dietary choices. Now, let me tell you something. I doubt that Rob Knight is vegan. I don't think that he has any agenda. I think that he's a scientist, and he's trying to find the truths of biology that exist. And this is what they found, that there was a clear number one most important factor in terms of predicting a healthy gut microbiome. Perhaps you've heard me say this before. If you've read my book, then you know what I'm about to say. The single greatest predictor of a healthy gut microbiome is the diversity of plants in our diet. So I started eating more plants, but this time more in abundance, in diversity, without restrictions, without limits, no calorie counting, just plant counting. And here's what happens. This is me in my 40s, never feeling better, never feeling more energized, accomplishing all my goals. I have no clue where I get my protein from. I'm kidding. All plants have protein. But accomplishing my fitness goals, I've never been stronger. I've never been more fit. I've never felt younger. And I'm in my 40s. This is defying all of the expectations that I had for how I would feel at this point in my life. I believe that healing my gut was key to my transformation. That's what I want to talk to you about today. So let's talk about these gut microbes. Inside our gut, living inside you, particularly in your colon, the large intestine, there are an insane number of these invisible species, these invisible microorganisms, and they are as alive as you and I are. 38 trillion gut microbes, mostly bacteria, also some fungi, archaea, in some cases parasites, and viruses. The number of gut microbes actually outnumbers our human cells, and they account for 99.5% of our genetic code, like literally 200 times more of our genes come from gut microbes than from ourselves. And we each have a diverse, abundant mix of different species of these gut microbes, between 300 and 1,000. And they're connected to the things that are really the crucial parts of human health. They're absolutely critical for our digestion. This is why people who have damaged their microbiome, they come to see me. They have digestive disorders, right? They allow us to unpack and get access to the nutrients in our food. What's more organic and necessary for a healthy life than that? They're connected to our immune system. 70% of our immune system is right there in our gut. They're talking to them. They're literally talking to them right now while we sit here. Connected to our brain, our mood, our cognition, the way we think, our metabolism, our hormonal balance, and even our genetic expression. They are powerful. And today, we're going to focus on this, the connection between our gut microbes and our metabolism. Now, when you look at damage to the gut microbiome, we call this dysbiosis. I'm going to show you what dysbiosis looks like in a moment, but just know that this is a loss of balance within the gut. When a person has dysbiosis, here's a list that I showed in chapter 1 of Fiber Fueled of the metabolic conditions. These are just the metabolic conditions associated with a damaged gut microbiome: obesity, type 2 diabetes, coronary artery disease, high cholesterol, chronic kidney disease, gout, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You go down the line. On this page, I have listed several of the top 10 causes of death in the United States, or things that contribute to our most dangerous medical conditions. So what is dysbiosis? Well, let's take a look at this picture here. This is straight out of a medical journal, so forgive me for being a bit nerdy. But on the left is homeostasis. This is a balanced gut. This is where we want to be. On the right is dysbiosis. This is the gut that's fallen out of balance. So with homeostasis, what you see up here, the blue microbes are the good guys, the red microbes are the bad guys. You have a mix. There's some blue guys, there's some red guys. Okay, it's fine. They're living in harmony. They're living in balance. It's okay. Everything is good. And you have these short chain fatty acids, which are these molecules created by these microbes, hard at work, right there in the colon. 70% of the energy of your colon cells comes from these short chain fatty acids. How could you have a healthy colon without adequate short chain fatty acids? On the flip side, dysbiosis. This is a damaged gut. On the internet, you see people refer to this as leaky gut. Be a little careful what you read on the internet. I don't think you need me to tell you that. But dysbiosis is when there's a loss of balance. And what you see here is that there's way less of the good guys. And the bad guys have kind of like taken over. They're running the show now. And where are the short chain fatty acids? They're nowhere to be seen. And as a result, this loss of balance affects the ability of the gut to function the way that it's supposed to. And when the gut doesn't function the way that it's supposed to, all these different things, digestion, immunity, metabolism, mood, our brain health, hormones, they all fall out of balance. So here's some sort of evidence that I would use to support these statements. If you give antibiotics to a pig, it will gain 16% more weight, even when you feed it the exact same number of calories. If you give antibiotics to a child, the child is more likely to be overweight or obese. Each course or round of antibiotics is associated with a 7% increased risk of being overweight and a 6% risk of being obese later in life. And you can actually, in a lab, and they've done this a million times, this is not hard to do, you can transfer a person's body type to an animal using just the gut microbes. So they do these studies where they will take these mice that are called germ-free. They don't have a microbiome. They're raised in unique conditions. They don't have a microbiome. And we are going to donate from a human, in this case, a normal-sized human, an obese human, and an underweight human. So a human is basically giving a stool specimen, and that stool specimen is basically transferring microbes into these mice that don't have a microbiome yet. They receive a new microbiome. And then what happens? You feed these 3 mice the exact same calories, the exact same amount of food. What do you find? The mouse with the normal microbiome becomes normal sized. The mouse with the obese microbiome becomes obese. The mouse with the underweight microbiome becomes underweight. Same food, same calorie consumption, different results in terms of body habitus. The microbiome is powerful. So today I want to talk about 3 ways that my metabolism was corrected by consuming fiber and healing my gut. And we're going to play a little game of Where's Waldo? Keep your eyes peeled for Waldo. Waldo loves fiber. He's going to show up when there's fiber. So number 1, you want a healthy metabolism? I want you to feel satisfied and full after you eat a meal. This is important because if you don't feel satisfied, you're going to feel either deprived or inclined to consume more. So they did an experiment and they fed a group of people both a tofu burger and a pork and cheese burger. Everyone received these 2 burgers, okay? And let's look at the characteristics of these burgers that people were eating. So the plant burger and the meat and cheese burger had the exact same number of calories and the exact same macros. There was a difference in terms of saturated fat. The meat and cheeseburger was high in saturated fat. There was a difference in fiber. No surprise. The plant burger was high in fiber. In fact, the fiber that you find in the meat and cheeseburger is not from the meat and cheese. There is no fiber in meat and cheese, 0. The fiber that you find in the meat and cheeseburger is the bun. That's your 2.2 grams of fiber. There you go. Okay, so difference in fiber, difference in saturated fat, but same calories, same macros. You guys have been told it's calories in, calories out. What happens? So we're looking here at the meat and cheeseburger in blue and the plant burger in orange. And they had 3 groups within the study. One group had diabetes, one group was obese, and one group was healthy controls. What do we find? This is a satiety hormone. When this hormone goes up, you feel satisfied, you feel full, right? We want more of these hormones so that we can appropriately feel that satisfaction after a meal. This GLP-1 was higher in all 3 groups after consuming the plant-based burger. Same calories, same macros, different results in terms of your ability to feel satisfied. More satisfaction from the plants. Peptide YY, again, satiety hormone. What happened? Once again, higher levels of peptide YY among the plant versus the meat and cheeseburger. Once again, you get a higher level of satisfaction from eating something with the same number of calories coming from a plant. And no surprise, these hormones are higher. So what happens? How satisfied were these people after the meal? Did they feel like they had enough? The answer was, in all 3 cases, diabetes, obesity, and healthy controls, when they ate the tofu burger, they felt satisfied. When they ate the meat and cheeseburger, they didn't get there. Disappointing. Same calories, same macros, more satiety with the plants. All right, let's talk about one of my most favorite metabolism studies, perhaps my most favorite metabolism study. This is conducted by Kevin Hall, who is a researcher at the National Institutes of Health. He's a metabolism researcher. And he decided to make a comparison between a plant-based diet and a animal-based ketogenic diet. Okay, so now Kevin Hall is interesting because his approach to doing diet, to doing these studies, is that he actually takes complete control. So what that means is that we're not doing like a survey, hey, what did you eat this past week? You know, those things are really hard to have confidence in. But instead, he has people come and live with him on the campus of the NIH. They have a special, what they call metabolic ward, where people actually come into the space and they take up residence. They stay there. And Kevin Hall's team is basically delivering meals. All right. So they're delivering meals. And in this study, what they said to these people is they said, we want you to eat until you're full. We'll bring you the food, eat until you're full. You want more food? We'll bring you more. You want snacks? We'll bring you snacks. Just eat until you're full. So they had 20 adults, body mass index of 27.8, that is considered overweight, not obese. Average age of 30 among these 20 adults. All 20 did both diets. They did 2 weeks each and they crossed over. Now, which one they did first was randomized. Let's look at the makeup of these diets a little bit. So on the left, we have the ketogenic diet, animal-based ketogenic diet. On the right, we have the plant-based low-fat diet. And what you find is that the big difference was in terms of carbs versus fat. So the protein was pretty much the same. But the animal-based ketogenic diet, to be a ketogenic diet, you have to be low carb. 10% carbs, 76% fat. Plant-based low-fat diet, 75% carbs, 10% fat. Here's the thing, fiber is a carb. So if you go low carb, you're chopping out the fiber, which is exactly what we see. In this study on the animal-based ketogenic diet, the average fiber intake was 8.5 grams per 1,000 kilocalories. Whereas on the plant-based diet, standardized again to 1,000 kilocalories, you're getting 31.4. Now let me try to frame where this sits, okay? The recommendation is for each of us to get 14 grams of fiber per 1,000 kilocalories consumed. 14 grams is the goal at a minimum. So on the animal-based ketogenic diet, they are fiber deficient. On the plant-based diet, they're in a great spot. They're getting plenty of fiber. What happens? Well, in this graph, we're looking at the time points from day 0 to 14. Again, everyone did both diets. So every single day we see, step on the scale, how much do you weigh? And we're looking at what happened to their body weight. All right, so don't be mad at me, but I'm gonna share some bad news with you, but don't worry, I got more to talk about with this. The bad news is this: the animal-based ketogenic diet led to increased weight loss, okay? So you can see they rapidly lost weight for about 9 days, and then it plateaued and leveled out. On the flip side, the plant-based diet took a little time to get started, but once it got started, it was very consistent. No leveling out, it's just coming down, okay? But at the end of the day, after 14 days, people did lose more weight on a ketogenic diet. The facts are the facts. But hold on. Let's look a little more closely at the weight loss. Not all weight loss is the same. Let's start with what is described as fat-free mass. Fat-free mass means you're not losing fat, which is what we're trying to lose when we lose weight. Fat-free mass means you are losing water and muscle. Now, before I show you this graph, I want you to ask yourself, do you want to lose water and muscle? Okay. So when we look at the fat-free mass, the water and muscle loss, man, ketogenic diet, rocking, tons of loss of water and muscle on the ketogenic diet. Plant-based diet, pretty much a straight line across. People are not losing muscle mass on the plant-based diet. Cool. How about actual fat loss? That's what we're here for. What happens? Plant-based diet, straight line going down. People are burning fat on the plant-based diet. Ketogenic diet, actually not losing weight in the first 7 days at all, not losing fat at all in the first 7 days. And then they did lose some. So that's a head scratcher. What's going on here? Well, let's break it down. They were told to eat until they were full. So they did. They achieved the same level of satiety, the same level of feeling full and satisfaction after their meals on both diets, right? That's what they were told to do. But hold up. Even though they have the exact same levels of satisfaction of satiety, literally every single person consumed less calories per day on the plant-based diet. In this column here, you can see how many calories they were consuming per day on the animal-based ketogenic diet. In this column here, you can see how many calories they were consuming per day on the plant-based diet. And in all cases, the line moves down. They're consuming less calories. And if you look at this over the course of the 14 days, every single day of the 14 days when people were eating plant-based, they were consuming substantially less calories. And you average this out over the course of the 2-week experiment. And for every day that they were plant-based, they were consuming 689 kilocalories less per day. This adds up. 700 calories of deficit per day is a pound of weight loss in 5 days. This adds up. Same level of satisfaction, same level of fullness, better results if you want to burn fat. So bottom line is that when they were eating until they were full, people consumed less calories and they lost fat, but not muscle on a plant-based diet. If you want to lose muscle and water, I would suggest the alternative. Am I surprised? No, I am not, because there is something special that takes place when the fiber that you saw in this study comes into contact with the microbes that exist in our gut. By themselves, they're not that great, just being honest. Fiber without the microbes, not this special thing that I would be writing books about. But fiber with the microbes is so special, it's worth celebrating, because they release these microbes, consume the fiber for us, and release these short chain fatty acids, the most anti-inflammatory molecule that exists. And Waldo seems to be very happy in the corner there. He's very pleased with the short chain fatty acids. Anytime you see me talk about short chain fatty acids, bear in mind, you can't have short chain fatty acids without involving the gut bugs. So if I talk about short chain fatty acids, I'm talking about your gut. Your gut's at the heart of it. And if you look, short chain fatty acids, which come from fiber consumption, right? We saw the tofu burger high in fiber. We saw the plant-based diet high in fiber. We saw how this affected satiety, how this affected satiety hormones. Guess what? Short chain fatty acids that come from when fiber meets microbes stimulate the release of satiety hormones, peptide YY, and GLP-1 to activate satiety hormones in the hypothalamus. The gut is the key. All right. Another thing, when it comes to metabolism, we want insulin sensitivity. This is very important. So insulin resistance is when a person requires increased levels of insulin to achieve the same level of blood sugar balance. The problem is that insulin is a growth hormone. So, like, to me, insulin resistance is a measure of metabolic imbalance. When we have insulin resistance, we don't have metabolic balance. And insulin resistance has been connected to a number of different things: high blood sugar, high blood pressure, altered blood lipids, visceral fat, high uric acid, high inflammatory markers, altered blood vessel function, increased blood clotting. It can progress to type 2 diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which, by the way, is soon to become the #1 cause of cirrhosis in the United States. Metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, our #1 killer, polycystic ovary syndrome. These are all connected. They did an interesting study. So, like, does insulin resistance with a unbalanced metabolism affect our weight balance? Does insulin resistance contribute to obesity? So Han et al. In the Journal of Pediatrics took a group of 95 non-diabetic overweight children, and they inserted them into a buffet. And they said, okay, guys, here's your buffet, go ahead and eat, and we'll see what happens. And here's what they found. Insulin resistance, if there, was an independent predictor of increased energy intake. Insulin resistance may be part of what's driving this. Flip side, obesity causes insulin resistance. This is through something called lipotoxicity. If you've ever read Mastering Diabetes, then you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read Mastering Diabetes, you should read Mastering Diabetes. Lipotoxicity is an oversupply of free fatty acids. Okay, now this oversupply can come from our diet, specifically when we consume saturated fats. Remember, I showed you the saturated fat intake on the tofu burger versus the plant-based versus the animal-based burger. Saturated fats and trans fats in particular contribute to this. But also it can be an inadequate capacity to store lipids, or it can be that our adipose tissue is so stretched and swollen with free fatty acids that it starts to actually spill into the bloodstream. So the problem is when these free fatty acids are showing up in the bloodstream, they start to look for places to disappear. Like, they don't want to be in the blood. So they basically start popping into our muscle, into our liver, into our pancreas. It turns out that, like, when fat starts showing up in muscle, liver, and pancreas, this is how you create insulin resistance. Here, let me show you how. So you get cellular dysfunction in each one of these tissues. When we eat a meal, our blood sugar goes up. Skeletal muscle, our muscle, accounts for 80% of our ability to basically bring our glucose level back down after a meal. If you have fat stuck in there, you are disrupting our ability to bring the glucose in. In the liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is an example of what happens when we start to deposit fat into the liver, and this can contribute to insulin resistance. And then finally, in the pancreas, the fat deposition in the pancreas causes injury to the beta cells. This is problematic. Beta cells produce insulin. So you impair your ability to control your blood sugar because you can't produce enough insulin because the fat is overtaking your pancreas. So this creates a vicious cycle of insulin resistance and obesity, right? So I mentioned before, insulin resistance, these kids at the buffet causes an energy excess, which leads to obesity. But obesity leads to the spillage of these free fatty acids, which is lipotoxicity contributing back to insulin resistance. And we can make it worse with the food that we eat. More saturated fat creates more free fatty acids, which basically feeds into the vicious cycle. So let's think about the Kevin Hall study that I showed you a minute ago, right? The NIH metabolism study, 20 people, plant-based versus keto-based. If this is true, then saturated fat intake should cause insulin resistance. Did it? Well, let's go back. All right, so I showed you the animal-based, low in fiber, plant-based, high in fiber. But how about saturated fat? Animal-based. Look at the saturated fat content, 24.8. Plant-based, a fraction, 2.1 grams. I mean, plants do contain saturated fat, but we're talking about a fractional thing here compared to consuming animal-based diet. And when they looked at this, they first measured free fatty acids. Remember, high free fatty acids is associated with lipotoxicity, which causes insulin resistance. On the animal-based ketogenic diet, as you can see, there was substantially higher levels of free fatty acids during the time after a meal. So you eat your meal, boom, spiking free fatty acids. Plant-based, not so much. And did it cause insulin resistance? Yes. They gave people a 75-gram oral glucose tolerance test. This is the gold standard for testing a person for insulin resistance. And when a person has insulin resistance, what you'll see is that when you give them sugar, they spike their sugar. They spike their glucose in their bloodstream. And that's exactly what you see on the animal-based ketogenic diet. Both of these people received 75 grams of glucose. One of them is spiking their sugar up to 175. The other one's going up to 140. It's a big difference. Insulin sensitivity with greater satiety, reduced caloric intake, and fat loss occurred on the plant-based diet. And let's bring it back to the gut. Remember, I told you, I think the gut is at the heart of this. Anytime we see short-chain fatty acids, we know the gut is involved because you can't create short-chain fatty acids without our gut microbes. And there are studies that show that short-chain fatty acids bind to the receptors on our liver, our pancreas, our fat cells, and our muscle. You guys, this is what I've shown you is exactly where the question of insulin sensitivity is being determined. All four places, short-chain fatty acids, they go there. They leave the gut, they go there. And they decrease lipid overflow, reduce fatty acid deposition in these tissues, enhance fat breakdown, and enhance insulin sensitivity. We've just fixed the problem. And the solution is short-chain fatty acids that come from fiber. Last thing, we want to avoid metabolic endotoxemia. So if you haven't heard of metabolic endotoxemia, I'm going to introduce you. So it turns out that living inside of us, we have these microbes that are called gram-negative microbes, okay? And it's based upon how they look when you do a stain and look under the microscope. And these gram-negative microbes, they have something in their cell wall that's called bacterial endotoxin, sometimes called LPS. And it can enter your bloodstream when you have an infection. And it can spike so hard that you end up with a person like this, right? I've seen this so many times as a medical doctor. I've taken care of these people. They get an infection. The infection causes a spike in metabolic endotoxin, which basically causes them to have rapid heart rate, drop in their blood pressure. They start breathing about 30 or 35 times a minute. They become confused. Eventually, they just shut down. Their brain shuts down. They can't function anymore. And this is life-threatening. This is what you see in a life-threatening infection. Now, that's not the only form of metabolic endotoxemia, though, right? That is a spike in these endotoxins. But I want to talk about a chronic, persistent, low-grade release of bacterial endotoxin. And that's what we see in people who have damage to their gut microbiome. You get the release of this bacterial endotoxin at levels that are 1.5 or 10 times higher than baseline. And it causes inflammation. Here's what we know. If you feed a mouse a high-fat diet, it will develop increased endotoxin levels. And with that, increased fat deposition, higher inflammation in the muscles, the liver, the fat, muscles, liver, fat. That's where the insulin resistance is. okay? You get insulin resistance. It leads to a cascade of events that disrupt the metabolism. If you inject bacterial endotoxin into a mouse, you see all this as well. It's the bacterial endotoxin. This is what's causing trouble. And these endotoxin levels in humans have been found to be twice as high in those with obesity, type 2 diabetes, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, let's zoom in on the gut for a moment here. And let's look first at a healthy gut. A healthy gut is lined by cells, okay? And these cells are basically fused together with things called tight junctions. And these tight junctions help to make these cells into a barrier, a wall. Imagine a medieval fortress, and that wall is intact, and it's helping to protect the castle, right? That's what we have inside of a healthy gut. And as a result of that, although this right here is bacterial endotoxin, although bacterial endotoxin does exist inside of our colon, it is not causing trouble because we have an intact barrier that is protecting us and keeping it out of our bloodstream. But on the flip side, when a person develops a leaky gut with increased intestinal permeability, where these tight junctions that are holding these cells together, they get popped open. And as a result of that, there are literally gaps between these cells. There's holes. It's like punching a hole into the wall of our medieval fortress. And now the invading army has a clear path to the citadel. So easy. Come on in, guys. We've opened it up for you. And what you see is that the bacterial endotoxin that used to stay just inside the lumen of the intestine is now creeping through and entering into our bloodstream. And that's how you get endotoxemia. So how does diet affect endotoxin levels? Well, they did a study with 8 healthy subjects, again, in a metabolic ward, and they did 1 month of a Western diet, okay, which is high in fat, lower in carbs, high in saturated fat, low in fiber, versus 1 month of a prudent diet. This was not a vegan diet, but it was a health-based diet that was very, very high in plants. Equal calories, lower in fat, higher in carbs, exact same protein, but it's low in saturated fat, and it's very high in fiber. What happened? What you see is that when people ate a Western diet for a month, they increased their bacterial endotoxin levels by 71%. Every single person in image A saw an increase. Every single person who ate this way had metabolic endotoxemia. Flip side, the prudent diet. What we see is that every single person consuming the prudent diet had a decrease in their bacterial endotoxin levels. They are protecting themselves from metabolic endotoxemia, and there was a decline of 31%. Actually, I should correct that. I made one mistake. There is one person, it appears, who did go up in terms of their bacterial endotoxin levels. So that would be an outlier. But on average, a decrease of 31% of bacterial endotoxin. How about if we add fiber to a high-fat meal? That's what they went to go find out. By the way, Waldo's popping up again. He loves fiber. 10 subjects. And these subjects, they did a high-fat meal with an egg muffin and a sausage muffin and 2 hash browns. But they did this meal either with or without 30 grams of fiber from cereal. Okay? Calories are the same. Same number of calories. The difference here is one contains a higher amount of fiber and the other one contains almost none. And what you see if you measure a person's endotoxin levels after this meal is that when they eat the diet without fiber, it is ramping up for 3 hours. Your bacterial endotoxin levels are rising for 3 hours. Flip side, you have fiber. Guess what? You don't nearly achieve the same levels of bacterial endotoxin. It peaks at 1 hour and immediately starts to decline. We have blunted the response. So they're eating a bad meal either way, but at least if they get the fiber in there, they're creating some protection because the fiber is in there. But what if the fat wasn't there? A high-fat diet, specifically saturated fat, drives metabolic endotoxemia. And you can attenuate this. You can attenuate some of the injury by adding fiber. And it all comes back to the gut, right? I've been saying this. It all comes back to the gut. Fiber connects with gut microbes. Gut microbes in our gut release short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids have been shown to enhance the growth of the good gut bugs, suppress the growth of the negative bugs, repair the tight junctions, bring them back together, restore competence to the barrier, reduce endotoxin release. And because of this, they even directly modulate the immune system for an anti-inflammatory effect. Everything that we're looking for is there because we consume fiber, because fiber connects with gut bugs to produce short-chain fatty acids. So here's the bottom line from my talk today. Short-chain fatty acids from dietary fiber connect with gut bugs. And what we get as a result of those short-chain fatty acids are enhanced satiety, insulin sensitivity, and reduced metabolic endotoxemia. And these are three pathways that help to optimize and balance our metabolism so that we can have the weight balance that we ultimately want. This is not just like theoretical, and this is not just the anecdote of, hey, Dr. B changed his diet and then lost a lot of weight. It's not just that. Okay. Let's look at the Adventist 2 study. And what we see, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, semi-vegetarian, and not vegetarian. And what you see is, let's watch as the fiber is rising as you move towards vegan. And guess what? The body mass index is declining. In fact, if you look at the Adventist 2 study, there's only one group that has a normal body mass index, and that is the vegan group. Each of the other 4 groups is considered overweight. And I can't talk about fiber without bringing in my absolute favorite fiber study of all time, Andrew Reynolds. He's from New Zealand. This was published in The Lancet on February 2nd, 2019. This is the largest, most powerful study ever to allow us to look at the effects of fiber. Like literally 120 million person years of data, which is absurd. And specifically when looking at fiber and weight balance, they did a review of 27 randomized controlled intervention trials, and they involved 2,495 study participants. Here's what they found. When people increased their dietary fiber, they lost weight. The quality of the evidence was graded as high. Now, that wasn't the only benefit. See, in this study, this is, again, the largest study to date, allowing us to look at the connection between dietary fiber and human health. People who consumed more fiber lived longer with less heart disease. They were less likely to die from heart disease. That's our number 1 killer. They were less likely to be diagnosed with colon, esophageal, breast cancer. They were less likely to die from cancer. That's our number 2 killer. They were less likely to have a stroke. That's our number 5 killer. They were less likely to be diagnosed with diabetes, our number 7 killer. And by the way, in interventional randomized controlled trials, they had lower blood pressure and lower cholesterol by simply consuming more fiber. So to be clear, I'm not saying that the fiber is the only thing that matters. There are polyphenols, there are phytonutrients, there's the food matrix. They're all very important. There's also sustainability and consistency. These things are very important. You need to find a diet that works for you. And there are other approaches to weight loss that are important as well. It's not just what you eat. It can be exercise, time-restricted eating, sleep, stress management. These are important factors. So there are many different mechanisms for weight loss. But what I am saying is that a diverse, abundant, plant-based diet is the optimal choice for energy balance, metabolic health, and gut health. You've been sold a bill of goods with restriction, with reduction, with removal, when in fact the solution is adding and abundance and counting plants instead of calories and finding joy in your food, finding pleasure in your food, eating until you're full, and allowing your body to fall into balance the way that it was supposed to. And this will translate into fiber-fueled weight loss for those of you who want it. For those of you who haven't heard yet, I am very excited. I have a new book coming up. So I've had a lot of people who reached out to me after the success of Fiber Fueled, and they wanted more. They wanted more recipes. Guess what? You'll have them. They wanted delicious food. Guess what? Alex Casparo is back. You'll have delicious food. But there was one thing that I wanted, and I put it into this book. I wanted to offer a tool that would help people who have food intolerances. I sit in a room with people who suffer with food intolerances. It's hard for them to find joy in their food. Their food hurts them. And because we need food to live, they repeatedly are traumatized by their relationship with their food on a daily basis. And I wanted to find a way to break that cycle. And I wanted to use my platform and this opportunity to write a book to actually create a tool that could transform a person's life who suffers with food intolerances. This is what some of the recipes look like. The recipes were photographed by Ashley McLaughlin. Complete full color cookbook, 125 recipes. But in addition, 11 chapters. I wrote a new book. Like, this is literally an entire book that also happens to include 125 recipes and full color photos. I teach about the growth strategy. This is the approach to fixing food intolerances. I have 2 protocols, low FODMAP and low histamine. I also, by the way, teach you how to sprout, how to ferment, how to make sourdough bread. These are important things in my kitchen. These are important things for gut health, and I want them to be in your kitchen too. So I thank you, everyone, for allowing me to come and speak to you today. Thank you, Chef AJ, for inviting me. You can find more at this website, theplantfedgut.com/cookbook. And if you're not following me on social media, please do. I would love to connect with you guys and hear more.
Wow, this was amazing. I mean, I've heard it say by many gastroenterologists that all disease begins and ends in the gut. But what I'm learning from your presentation, Dr. Will, is that weight loss also begins and ends in the gut.
I think that what it comes back to, Chef AJ, is that I'm showing you, in this. So I said in the beginning, our gut is connected to our digestion, immune system, metabolism, hormones, our mood, and our brain health. Okay, this talk, we lifted up the hood on the gut metabolism connection. We're zooming in, we're taking a look, and I'm showing you these specific reasons, these 3 specific ways that because your gut can produce short-chain fatty acids when you eat plants, you have the ability to rebalance your metabolism. And you will derive the results of this without restriction, without removing, without putting yourself in a position where you are fearful of your food. You can gravitate towards food that you love. You can eat it in abundance with joy and diversity, and you can accomplish your weight loss goals in that process.
I love that, because so many people come from a background of restricting food, counting calories, carbs, points, where they're weighing and measuring their food on a plate, and they're restricted to like 7 ounces of vegetables. And how are they ever going to get the diversity of plants eating 7 ounces of vegetables?
Well, they're not. And those diets are not sustainable. And there's a reason why we're all fed up with the fad diets that perhaps give us weight loss in the very beginning. And then we rebound and we bounce right back up and we end up less healthy than the way that we began. You all saw in my presentation, this is not me speculating. This is high quality research from the National Institute of Health, from one of our leading metabolism researchers, showing us that yes, you will lose weight on a ketogenic diet. That's water and muscle mass. That's not fat. If we want fat loss, then what we do is we should lean into something that is sustainable, that does not require restriction, that does not require you to go to bed hungry, but instead eating until you're full, but making it the right food. And then you win.
That was mind-blowing in the study, how by eating the same amount of satiety, they ate like something like almost 700 less calories.
Yeah, it's and the beauty of that is that this is a demonstration of biology and the way that our body works. When we consume fiber connects with microbes. Microbes release short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids go to our hypothalamus. by producing these satiety hormones, and we feel full.
I mean, I knew from your book how important fiber was to pretty much all bodily processes, but I had no idea how important they were to increasing these satiety hormones, which is going to make it so much easier for people to lose weight.
Yeah, this is, Chef AJ, this is why, as I sat there in 2018, my book journey started in 2018. And as I sat there in 2018 and looked at the medical literature, and I said, everyone is talking about this and that, restrictive diets, whatnot. You know, the solutions that they're proposing for gut health are the opposite of what the medical literature is showing us. Let's allow science to be our compass, and that compass is going to guide us to better results when we just lean into that.
I'm wondering if you feel that maybe some people need to fix their gut before even attempting to, quote, reduce weight, because so many people that watch this summit the last 4 years say, well, I've tried to eat more plants, but I get gassy, I get bloated, and I give up.
Yeah. So this is a great point. And I do think that fixing your gut, like, how can you be successful in balancing your metabolism and eating a diverse, abundant diet if you are suffering because of the food that you're trying to eat? And again, the solution is not to withdraw these foods that are causing gas and bloating. The solution is to rise above, to train your gut, to make it stronger, to restore function, and to find yourself with the ability to consume these foods without restriction. And that is entirely possible. And that is exactly what my new book is about. The Fiber Fueled Cookbook is, again, you want recipes? I got recipes. Delicious food? I got delicious food. But you know what? If you suffer with food intolerances, if you're one of these people who's like, I don't think I can eat that way, Dr. B, that's why I created this book for you. We have to level the playing field. I wanted a book where every single person can show up in the same book, and we can all find joy together in eating delicious food.
In general, do you recommend people get their calories from whole plants versus processed plants? Because, for example, olive oil has become very controversial in general. And I'm wondering how you feel that pertains to weight loss.
Yeah, so all dietary choices end up falling on a totem pole where you can always make healthier choices and you can always make less healthy choices. And for each one of us, it's about finding balance where we feel very comfortable and it is sustainable and we're happy with our dietary choices. All right. So with regard to this specific question, though, I feel that the consumption of oil, so there is no more calorie dense food that exists on the planet. And I've just given you a talk where I've heralded the benefits of consuming fiber in your diet. And I can tell you what the fiber content of any oil is. It doesn't matter what the oil is. It's all the same. The fiber content is 0. So if the goal is weight loss, I don't see the value in consuming olive oil. Now, that being said, there is like this part where it's like, this is about sustainability. And so at the end of the day, you have to find what works for you. And there can be an entry point into a plant-based lifestyle where you find joy and happiness that begins with the consumption of oil. And as you move towards accomplishing your weight loss goals, you remove it. And that's okay. And you are more than welcome here. I want you here.
That's great. You know, I don't know if people even realize that there's no fiber in oil, just like in the slides you showed versus the plant burger versus the meat burger. I think a lot of people don't even realize that there's no fiber in animal products, that any fiber on that slide came from the bun.
There are 3 major classes of prebiotics. Chef AJ, there's 3 major classes. Prebiotics, by the way, are the food for our gut microbes. This is what they consume. And the 3 major classes are fiber, resistant starches, and polyphenols. Polyphenols are antioxidant compounds. Well, guess what? All 3 of these are exclusive to plants. You will not find them anywhere else. With the exception of mushrooms. I should add mushrooms because they're fungi. So technically they're not plants, but they do contain these. But plants and mushrooms, that's it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, fiber is, you know, I've had Dr. Barbara Rolls is one of the experts on the summit, and there's something, fiber is just so filling.
Yeah, and we saw that in the tofu burger versus the animal-based burger where, look, same calories, same macros, Yet the tofu burger, because it was high in fiber, activated the peptide YY, the GLP-1, these two satiety hormones. And so even though these people were consuming the exact same number of calories, the exact same macros, they felt greater satisfaction when they ate the plant-based burger. They felt full.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever dealt with this, but how does someone who's had gastric bypass surgery, how does that affect their microbiome? Because aren't they actually cutting some of it out?
There is a clear shift. So there's multiple different types of bypass surgeries. There's the traditional gastric bypass surgery, which you're probably referring to, Chef AJ. But then there's other ones, like, for example, a sleeve gastrectomy. And each one of these, when they look, it's actually quite fascinating because the body starts to have changes to the metabolism that occur almost immediately within the first few days. And one of the things that's taking place is that there is a shift in the gut microbiome as a result. So to look at the gut microbiome in these cases, you have to look at each individual surgery and what they found. But the point is that regardless, what we do know is that in each of these cases, the gut microbiome is a part of the equation and what's happening there.
That's so interesting. I'm thinking that if the diet industry could market a pill with short chain fatty acids, they'd make billions of dollars.
Well, they will. They will. That will happen. Anything that becomes hot. So, there was a period of time, Chef AJ, where we saw people getting good results on a gluten-free diet. Why would people get good results on a gluten-free diet? Because they're not eating processed food. They're eating real food. And so when people started seeing, oh, they're getting good results on a gluten-free diet, guess what happens? The food industry said, let's make a gluten-free junk food. So is that a healthy diet? Heck no. So, and that's the point. We have to be, I believe, that we have to be very cautious and aware of that in the plant-based world, which is that we call things plant-based. Plant-based means it's coming from whole plant foods. Vegan means that it is the absence of animal products. There's a difference between vegan and plant-based. And there's also different motivations. To me, plant-based means that you are motivated by human health, your health. And veganism is motivated by ethical considerations in the environment, which are beautiful things. But you can be a junk food vegan, and that's not a healthy diet. And you can eat plant-based, and you can eat plant-based and not necessarily be exclusively plant-based. And that is a pathway that exists for people who are looking to make this transition. So, like, to me, it comes back to this. My transition was over years. I didn't wake up one day and eat 100% plant-based. This took time. And I want to connect with the person who's out there, who's the version of me from 2012, and say, you're 10% plant-based, cool, I was 5. Let's move it to 20. You're going to feel better. And then you're going to want 30 and 40 and 50, and you're just going to keep going. But do it in a way that's sustainable and that you can actually manage. Do it in a way that you're comfortable with, because I think that's important too.
Well, I love at the beginning, you called it radical abundance. That could almost be the name for your third book, because that's really what you're talking about. And I'm so grateful to your wife for introducing you to this way of eating, because we certainly need your voice in the world. And I just have to comment on that before and after photo of you. You look amazing. And I mean, you look younger now than you did 10 years ago.
I know. Is that crazy? I mean, I look at that myself and I'm just like, look, picture's worth 1,000 words. There it is.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Will, what's the real truth about weight loss?
The real truth about weight loss is that if you want to heal your gut, it's not through restriction, it's not through reduction, it's not by counting calories. It's through abundance. It's through gravitating to healthy food. It's about counting plants. And when you do that, you are empowering your gut microbiome by fueling it with fiber. And by fueling it with fiber, you are creating short-chain fatty acids, and those short-chain fatty acids I've shown you today will work right there in your colon and also spread throughout the body and provide you with the healing benefits that you search for as you try to rebalance your metabolism and achieve your weight balance goals.
I love that. Count plants, not calories. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chef AJ. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out today.